Hey, what is up? This is Jake. We have a Rut mashup video ready to play. Before we get into it, be sure to hit that subscribe button and like button if you do enjoy it. If you haven't seen some of these full-length interviews, they're on our channel, and there are a lot of great information throughout the full stages of the season. But this one is a quick montage of Rut concepts from Don Higgins, Jason Michael, and Jeff Sturgis. So we hope you enjoy it. Let's go ahead and get right into it.
You know, there's one really interesting thing that I wrote about at North American Whitetail. I think it was in 2015 that not many people caught it when I said it. It didn't catch on like, you know, the same. I did the article same time, same place back in 2003, and that quirk in a deer's habits seemed to catch on. So now a lot of people talk about catching a buck in the same place at the same time every year. But the other thing I noticed that I wrote about in 2015, that the title of the article was Homecoming Bucks. And what I noticed is that these bucks that shift their range in the fall, they have a definite summer range, and then they have a different fall-winter range. And what I noticed is that these bucks that shift their range at the very beginning of the rut, they will a lot of times make a journey back to where they summered, or at the very tail end of the rut, they'll make a journey back to where they summered. And my theory is that these bucks relocate early in the fall. They've got their home range, they stay there. As the rut starts to heat up, they can't find a hot doe at home, and they're really anxious to get that first hot doe. So they get so anxious they run back home to where they spent the summer, and they look for it there. I mean, I've got example after example, and I was showing some of those in my seminar that I did here earlier today, that these bucks, it's around, say, November 5th to about the 7th or so, right before them does are coming in heat. I see these bucks, these mature bucks that have relocated, run back to where they spent their summer. And then right at the last 3 or 4 days of November, the first 2 or 3 days of December, they'll do the same thing. Sometimes the same buck will do both. A lot of times I don't catch them both doing it early and late, and I think a lot of it is just tied to whether they can find a hot doe at home or not. If they can, they stay there, but if not, they run back to where they spent their summer.
When do you find most success in hunting in general? As far as are you tagging most of those deer in the rut, October, December?
Absolutely.
When are you finding your most success?
For the last 20 years, if I had to throw one day out of the whole 3-month window, if you wanted to use October, November, and December as an example, Iowa was a perfect example one time. November 4th, and November 4th. Morning, and morning. And that's just maybe because I was back in the bedding, and November 4th is an extremely strong pre-rut day. It might be getting to where it's just about to come off of it. 5th and 6th will pretty much start turning into full-blown by the 8th, 9th, 10th, for the most part, for sure. And that for the last 20 years, I mean, I say the last 20 years, that would be my window, a pre-rut or a rut, mostly peak rut. But for me now, October, and I would want to tell you December. Again, I'm just rogue. I want to hunt all the stages of the deer hunting season. I would like to be better in October than I currently am, and I'm going to try and be a better hunter during the month of October, here moving forward in the next 10 years. But yeah, for the most part, it's been that pre-rut or rut.
Me too.
Yeah. No, it is what it is.
Yeah.
Who can argue the fact that deer are on their feet more during daylight than November 5th through the 15th?
It's a good time to
And
be in the woods.
I don't want to speak for you, Jake and Chad. I've known you a little bit longer, obviously, but for the most part, we're opportunists. I don't got trail cameras of 5 buck over 160, and I get to know their personalities and go buck 2 and buck 5 they should be a little easier to kill than these other guys. So, I've got to know him over a 2-3 year period, and this guy, I'll try and kill him. He always shows up here on our late season food plot. I should be able to get him with a late muzzleloader.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I kind of think like that, but yeah, it's an interesting game, but I'm an opportunist. I still am an opportunist.
You have to be.
Yep.
I mean, you have to be.
So I keep going back to just the crazy sporadic schedule, and this is I'm kind of really jumping topics here, but as you're talking, I'm visualizing, my, I'm going to call it insane work schedule or workload, whatever you want to call it, and trying to manage opportunistic times to be in the woods in just one state. So when you're in Ohio and Pennsylvania and maybe New York and then going to Kansas and Wisconsin, or wherever you're going, I mean, is there a strategy like, hey, I'm gonna go hunt Kansas during the rut because I can get on a waterway and wait for those Rut Bucks to make those long super travel, those long super movements, and then I'm gonna come back to Ohio, maybe the southern part of the state, and hunt late season because I know food's limited and I'm gonna be over a food source, or like, is there any thought process there, or are you just
There is.
wherever you are, you are?
It is. But my passion has been Kansas. So I got this year coming up will be 23 years straight in a tree stand, come November, if you will. But here's the nuts and bolts of it, and I'll try and give you the short version of this, because that easily could be a 30-minute topic, and it's just freaking awesome. And I like to hear other people, talk about their timing or their scheduling. So I'm going to take the first 2 weeks of Pennsylvania. Again, this is the third time I've said it here on this podcast. Keep in mind my income. So I don't have disposable money. I don't even have an extra $2-3 grand sitting there. So, now I can leave home earlier in October and go on the road. So I'm going to take the first 2 weeks of October. I'm going to try and burn 1, if not 2 doe tags in Pennsylvania. Which, by the way, we think we're getting our season moved 2 weeks ahead. We might start September 15th now in Pennsylvania.
And maybe possibly Sundays.
Yes,
right?
possibly Sundays. And black bear's going to get moved 2 weeks up into archery more than it already got moved up last year at Halloween. So the archers are going to have a lot of advantages there. So I'm just trying to come to full draw a little bit, have some fun. If I see an illegal PA buck with 3 points on one side, depending on where I'm at, I may or may not shoot it. And then I'm going to delve in about October 15th or 18th. It's time to fly. And this year I come home 2 days before Christmas and left 2 days after Christmas. And I pretty much know nothing's really written down. It's just chiseled in stone. I'm going to drop into Ohio for about 3-4 days and bow hunt, and probably plan on not even seeing nothing but a 2.5-year-old if I'm lucky. It's just the way it is. That area for me isn't really conducive for what I got. I don't have great ground in Ohio. At best, it's okay. And then I'm going to move on to Kansas and probably set my stands. Then I'm going to move up into Ohio and probably set a stand or two. And then I might retrace my steps back, and if I have the money to get an Illinois tag or some friends to hunt with Missouri, I'm just burning a little time and letting the season start to fester. But the more I've gotten into this game, now I'm going to start, and I've done this before, my best really body weight deer, and we validated it, we weighed him, we filmed him 3 different camera angles, counting the GoPro, was Wisconsin, and I shot that deer October 22nd on a scrape line, and he meant business. His paw was moving, he was working the branch, and the Grim Reaper broadhead went through, and he went 30 yards, weighed 281 pounds. We never gutted him. And so what I'm getting at is I have a system there. I think Wisconsin, northern Illinois, parts of Iowa, yeah, that's a great place to be the 4th week of October. Keep in mind, if you're an opportunist like I was, and you got 1 week to hunt, it almost has to be the 2nd week in November if you're going to wait 4 years to draw your tag in Iowa. If you're going to spend money to buy an expensive tag in Illinois, get room and board and food, right there's $1,500, and you haven't even stepped foot on public ground in Illinois. So, yeah, like Jake and I were joking here earlier, and he said he's the same way. That's your window to hunt, the 5th through the 15th, if you're going to spend your hard-earned dollars of November. But for me, having way more time on my hands now and a couple more dollars to work with, yeah, I do have that system where I go around the country, and then the end of October for me now is Iowa. The 1st week in November, depending on if I have an Illinois tag or I have friends to hook up with in Indiana, that's kind of a neat window. And then by the 15th of November, because I've been guiding for, probably 10, 12 years in Kansas, that 15th through the 30th for me is what I call the peak of rut for me. I'm in the extreme southern tier of Kansas. I'm down by Oklahoma. So that's my window to do my personal bow hunting, and then usually as a rule, November 30th, December 1st, I guide for 5 to 10 days depending on the rifle hunters I have. And then after that, it's kind of clean up shop, work my way back into the state of Ohio, which I would just kill to be. And people say, why don't you do it then? Because it just hasn't fit my schedule yet, and I have a hard time letting Iowa go in the end of around Halloween and Illinois go in the 1st week of November, and I just got that routine. But I would love to be in Ohio in a tree stand the 10th, 11th, 12th, and 13th of November.
Not every tactic relates to every area, and that's so important because you'll see the hot tactic of the moment. And, there can be a lot of frustration trying to put that square peg in a round hole in the wrong location.
Yeah, because we were talking at breakfast. Necessarily, in your experience or in your thoughts, looking for beds in the summer to hunt during the rut is not necessarily the best tactic, or it can be kind of diminishing.
Many wasted hours over the last couple of years, but not if it's in the right location.
Right. The difference between marsh bedding or swamp bedding and then bedding
Versus
like hill country, big
Big
woods,
woods.
the two.
Or even if you go up into the big swamps of northern Minnesota, upstate New York, northern Michigan, the UP in Michigan, northern Wisconsin, then it's the same thing. Where you have that big unbroken blocks of timber, looking for a buck bed and going back and trying to hunt that with a bow is just it's not only a recipe for no success, but it's just ridiculous. It's a big waste of time now. But that same tactic in those big open marsh settings where you have islands and you have constrictions where bucks are going to bed, and you can push that to private land too. I hunt next to buck beds, and most of these bucks are killed adjacent to buck bedding areas or interior remote sections of bedding. And I still have to wait to the perfect time. I can't be overly aggressive because I'm hunting areas where if I spook them, they're gone. You flip that down into Iowa, Kansas, portions of Missouri, Kentucky. Then in those areas, you can find locations that, because of the lack of hunting pressure and the overall number of bucks and mature bucks, you can afford to be aggressive, because if you spook those bucks out of those areas, you can hunt it 3 days later and there might not be another buck that will come into that area. So, how aggressive you can be, island marshes, low pressure hunting land areas, big farmland scenarios versus big woods. Doesn't matter if it's Kentucky, Pennsylvania, or northern Minnesota, Wisconsin. Completely different tactics for looking. And so I'm narrowing it down to, if you want to hunt early, you can be aggressive. You almost need to be aggressive in those small island marsh type areas where the potential for buck bedding is very minimal, versus those areas where you're hunting big movement, big rut funnel, big rut cruising areas in big open public land that's tens of thousands of acres. Then I'm hunting peak of the rut. I'm looking for, and I might have a collection of bucks I'm after because I've had a trail camera on a scrape or something. I know what's out there. But I'm looking for just one of those to come by. It's more time in the stand. It's more time in the funnel.